Hello and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Hunter Facebook Live. We do this every Wednesday. It's a chance to check in and share some fun information with you guys. So today we're going to be talking about mixed media collage. And so there's a few terms there that I'll go over really quickly for those of you who don't know. So when we talk about media, media is the material in which an artist uses to make a work of art. So when you go to the museum and you see the little sign, the information panel on the side, we call that a didactic panel. When you see that next to the artwork, it'll tell you a lot of really important information. It'll tell you the name of the artist. It'll tell you the name of the artwork, the title of the artwork, the year it was made, and it'll also tell you the medium or the media, which is what the artwork is made with. So very often we see things like a photograph, a black and white photograph, or color, or oil paints, acrylic. So when you see mixed media, what that means is that the artist is utilizing a whole bunch of different media and materials at the same time. And this is really fun because it gives kind of a ton of freedom of expression with a lot of different materials. And then collage has to do with how you put it together. So if you're familiar with paper collage, that's the idea of cutting out pictures and images and gluing them together to create a finished work of art, a collection of images. So a mixed media collage will be a gathering of a whole different bunch of items and objects and papers and materials that get put together into a work of art. And there's some really great examples of that on display right now at the F Word in the Hunter exhibition, the F Word right now. There's some great pieces that utilize mark making, painting, collage with materials, Miriam Shapiro's work that collages fabric, as well as paper, Leslie Dill, who includes sculptural objects as well as fiber, threads, painting and other materials. Even Beverly Sims, who kind of pushes this envelope between this idea of what is an object, what is a sculpture, and what is a two-dimensional piece. For example, Carrie Mae Weems has a piece in our exhibition that is a book, which is traditionally a two-dimensional thing. But as you open it up and it pops out, then you have this opportunity to have a three-dimensional interaction with the artwork as well. So with this mixed media collage, we are really thinking about the different ways we can create dynamic things by pulling lots of different materials together. So my favorite part of this in my own art making is the gathering. And right now I'm in my studio and I'm going to admit it's a little messy, but this is how I work. So I want to share this with you, but this is sort of how I prepare to make work. Don't judge me by the piles of things, but if I'm going to be doing a collage, I spend a lot of time going through books and pulling out anything that really grabs my attention. So I'll pull out illustrations and pictures and cut them out ahead of time. Okay. I also kind of gather things from the world around me. So I'm always looking for interesting stones and rocks, dried insects, shells when you're going on vacation or you have things from places you stones, feathers. What happens is then, oh, this is a little dark, sorry, is by putting these things together, you can create a really unique work of art. So you're taking all these objects and items and materials and putting them together into a finalized work of art. This is another piece I wanted to show you as an example. And we're going to talk a little bit how to make something like this. So this is a mixed media piece. And there's a lot of different things that kind of go into this. First of all, there is the box itself. This is from an old cigar box. There is some drawing and painting element on the bottom of the box. And then all of the other materials are objects and images that were gathered kind of throughout the course, kind of over a period of time and then put together. So we're going to talk a little bit and walk through the process of making a work of art like that right now. So the first thing, like I said, is kind of the gathering, getting all the things together. And it's kind of a fun way to dig through bottom old drawers. I have tons of things laying around my house that can be really interesting that maybe you normally might throw out, but for this, it might add a really interesting texture. So for example, I have kind of this old leather strap. I have some stones and shells that I mentioned, and I have lots of pictures and images that I've already cut out. And so the next part is kind of my favorite part, and it's one of the things I really like about collage is that you can kind of cut and play and arrange things before you commit to locking them down and gluing them in place. Okay, so what I'm going to start off with here is I have a few things. This is a canvas board. It's a little 4x6 canvas board. You can buy these at arts and crafts stores, and they come, it's basically a stretched canvas that's already primed, so it's ready to be used right away. And it's kind of stretched and put over a thicker board, so it's nice and strong. So these work really well. I also have some scrap bits of wood. This is actually a lid from that cigar box that I just showed you, but I've also used just thick pieces of paper. I've used cardstock from old cards. I've even taken cards and you can just collage right onto like some blank cards or notebook cards and just layer over it, and that adds a really nice thickness to it. You can also mail a letter to a friend that you miss. Okay. Even using materials like this was the cover of an old book that kind of fell apart and got damaged. So, and what I do regularly in the studio, like this is a piece I've been working on, but these are a whole bunch of images that I've had kind of stockpiled off to the side that I started cutting and gluing together. And then you can kind of see what it looks like on different backgrounds. So again, this is kind of the fun part of collage, is you can take a look at what it looks like and move things around, add other things to it, add different textures, think about what it looks like first, kind of play with it before you glue it down. So in that, so the materials are important. What you want to use is really up to you. How you put them together is up to you. Okay. But then how you glue them down is also really important. So when it comes to glue, there's a few different things you can keep in mind. If you're just, you can use white glue. I also really like Mod Podge. Some people are familiar with Mod Podge. You can get in glossy or matte, and matte means it isn't shiny, which I prefer sometimes. If you're going to use fabric, and you're going to be adhering a lot of fabric and paper together, there's also a type of glue called PVA, which is polyvinyl acetate. And that works really well for when as it dries, it shrinks a little bit. So it helps keep your paper and your fabric from getting wrinkled. So it keeps it nice and flat. And it also preserves it. It lasts a little bit longer. So if you wanted to invest in a good collage glue, I really like PVA. So I have some images here that I've been collecting, and I'm going to kind of think about how I want to arrange them on my board. Okay. And when I do collage, what I recommend you do is when you have the image that you want to attach, and I've already kind of played around with it and thought about how I want this to look, so I'm just going to dive into it. You're going to put the glue, a thin layer of the glue, onto the back of the paper. I start from the middle and work out to the edges. That way I know that I am covering the whole back of the image, but I'm also not catching the edges and wrinkling or tearing them, because depending on how thin the paper is, you can damage it as it gets moist from the glue. So you don't want to accidentally tear or damage your paper. Okay. So my image is now coated on the back. I'm going to put it down onto my canvas board. Okay. And I'm just going to start in the middle and press out towards the edges. This gets rid of any air bubbles that might be in there and helps make sure it's a nice, smooth fit to the edges. Okay. Now, if you want to, some people like to put a layer of the Mod Podge or your acrylic glue, whatever you're using, over the top as well. I don't always do that because I don't necessarily want to see the glue, but if you want it to have kind of a glossy finish, or if you want to seal the paper or the item into your collage, you can do that. Okay, so I'm going to keep going with adding my images here. And again, I'm just going to take the glue. I have a mat down on my workspace so that I have a spot that gets a little sticky with glue. And then after I put the piece down, I can take a rag and wipe it up so that it doesn't damage my next piece of paper. Okay, so I'm going to take my little bird, put him on here. And while the glue is still wet, you can kind of slide and move your image around a little bit, which I like. So in case you get it in kind of an off spot. Okay. There we go. And one more. Okay, so again, I'm starting at the middle and working my way out. And I am using the Mod Podge glue for this because it works really well for paper material. Okay. Stick that one down as well. Great. Okay. So here is my collage with the paper images there. Now the next thing I can do is think about if I wanted to add other textures or other materials to the outside. Sometimes I like, I think it looks kind of neat to play not only with texture but with different levels. So right now paper is very, very flat, but if you take something that's a little bit more three-dimensional, as I mentioned, like a shell, or I've also been collecting lots of really interesting kind of dried nuts and seeds. These are things that you can glue onto as well to kind of add a thickness or a dimension to your work. For heavier objects, I was kind of talking about the acrylic, Mod Podge, PVA, things like that for working with paper and fabric. If you work with something that's a little bit heavier, a little bit thicker, this is a really great glue to use, the E6000. It's also an acrylic-based glue. It's clear and it's transparent. It's a little flexible, but it's very strong. So you can use it to kind of hold on heavier objects onto your surface that you're working with. People also tend to sometimes have like a hot glue gun, things like that. If you want to get really heavy duty, you can get a 2-part epoxy from the hardware store, and that works really, really well. But that one's a little bit more toxic, and definitely make sure you read the instructions about ventilation and how to use that properly. So again, mixed media is a great way to bring in lots of different materials and elements. Other things that you might have that you wouldn't normally think about using in your artwork is even, I have a lot of old like silverware or old just kind of things that kind of don't work the way I would use them anymore. These are things that would be really interesting to add, again, to texture and to add a little bit of like height, or just an interesting thing to bring into your work. So if you had a lot of stuff that you weren't using anyways, have fun gluing it together and turning it into something new. And sometimes it's just a fun way to experiment with the things that we have around us and use the materials that we already have available in our homes rather than going to the store and buying a kit. It's a little bit more of a risk. You don't know how it's going to turn out, but it's a fun risk. And you sometimes end up with some really interesting, really creative ways of remembering some of the objects and the items that you have in your home. So I hope that you will give it a shot, take some things, glue them together, make something fun. If you do, please share it with us on social media or send us an email. We'd love to share it out or just say congratulations to you for making something really beautiful. Also, please come to the F Word if you are able and willing. We have some really wonderful examples of this work in the collection, as well as a great push and pull between sculptural and two-dimensional works that are on display, and many that use mixed media in their approach. So please come out and support us. We look forward to seeing you, and thank you so much for spending this time with me today. Take care.